2018 Republican candidates for governor for our state of Wyoming. We are proud and grateful to have Fremont County Senator and Wyoming's President of the Senate, Eli Bebout, as the moderator of tonight's program. Pepper Ottman, President of the Fremont County Republican Party, will give us an invocation.
Okay, if you'd like, please stand, and we'll do this. Okay. Gracious Heavenly Father, we come before you this evening and thank you that we live in a nation where we can do this. I thank you for each one of the people that are here, that are taking responsibility for the things that go on in this great country and our state. We thank you for the people that are giving of their time and talents to run for this office, the many miles that they travel, the money that is spent, and Lord, the hours that they just go and go. We pray that you would give them good health, safety as they travel. Lord, we pray tonight that everything would be done decently and in order, that things would be said that need to be said, that information would be gleaned that needs to be gleaned, and Lord, that we would all be better for it. Please bless us as we go on in this meeting, and we'll give you the praise and honor. In Christ's name I pray, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pepper. And now Lois Terps, longtime active Republican in Fremont County. Would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now we will turn the program over to Senator Bebout to begin the forum.
Yeah, thank you, Georgia, and welcome everybody to this forum. And it is a forum, and ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate you being here. Just a couple of quick things in my opening comments. All elections are important, and this certainly is very important, like the ones we've had in the past. But in Wyoming, it's very unique because not only we're going to have all the local elections, the city, towns, and counties, and all of those elected officials, but also we're going to have 15 new senators elected for the legislature, as well as 60 House members. But for the 5 elected officials statewide, there will be 5 running for election, and we know we will have 4 new ones. I'm not sure that's ever happened before in the history of our state. Maybe it has, but there will be 4 new members of the 5 elected officials, and of course the governor would be one of those. We also have, we're running a U.S. senator, and we also have the congressional race. You know, the thing about the issues that come up, and you know, Wyoming is such a great place, a unique state, and by the way, thank all of you candidates for stepping up and running. It's not easy, but there are a lot of issues, and that's the purpose of the forum tonight, is to give you, the voting public, an opportunity to see how these people respond to these questions. These questions came from people in Fremont County. As Georgia mentioned, we also have comments, some cards out there. If you have some specific questions you'd like to ask, please give them to us, and we'll try to run them in, and we'll ask these questions. The issues, you know, we all know the issues are. There's a bunch of them. I wrote some of them down. Our revenue picture for the state of Wyoming, our revenues are down, our expenditures are up. We all know what's going on with education. Maybe the biggest issue is jobs, diversification of our economy. The governor, working with the legislatures, came out with the Endow program to see if we can create jobs and opportunities for the young people in this state. And how do we provide that, yet how do we do it in a way that we can afford to have them here? There's just a lot of different issues, the prison, the Title 25, it goes on, and all you candidates are going to have an opportunity, hopefully, to answer some of those questions. And with that, I'd like to introduce the candidates. And what we did procedurally is everybody drew a number out of a hat, and we ranked them this way. And so for opening comments, everybody will get 4 minutes for their opening statement. We start with one down here with Harriet, and we go down the end at number 6, which is Sam. And then at the end of the meeting, we'll give them 2 minutes, or the forum will give them 2 minutes to respond to their closing remarks. In between, I'm going to ask questions. And we're going to try to alternate it between, we'll go with 1 and 6 will be the question, then we'll go 2 and 5, 3 and 4, then we'll reverse it, and nobody will answer the same question, and everybody will have a chance to be able to answer questions, but yet not the same two will be answering the same questions. And that's the format we'll have. We'll try to do 3 rounds of questions, and with that, I'd like to introduce the candidates, and then we'll go through and let them give their opening remarks. We have Harriet Hageman, Bill Dahlin, Taylor Haynes, Mark Gordon. Foster Freeze. And Sam Galeotos. Okay, Harriet, you're number one. 4 minutes. Oh, by the way, the lights will be flashing. Where are the lights? Right here. They're not big enough for you to see. Green means go. Yellow means you ought to slow down, and red means stop, as we all know. Go ahead, Harriet. Welcome.
Wonderful. Well, yes, my name is Harriet Hageman. I grew up on a ranch near Fort Laramie, Wyoming. I have a large family. Many of my family members are still in the ag industry, primarily in commercial cattle production. And I also have several family members who are in education, including my mother and my sisters, sister-in-laws, and good family friends. My father served in the legislature for 24 years. After I graduated from high school, I went to Casper College for 2 years on a livestock judging scholarship. I then went to the University of Wyoming, where I received my bachelor's degree in business administration, and in 1989 I graduated from law school. In 1997, the state of Wyoming hired me to handle the Nebraska versus Wyoming litigation over the North Platte River. We fought against Nebraska's ultimately unsuccessful water grab. I returned to private practice in the year 2000, and I own my own law firm. I started it without any government assistance. I am a water and natural resource attorney. I represent irrigation districts, cities, counties, ranchers, farmers, outfitters and guides, the sportsman community, small business owners, state employees, oil and gas companies, and real estate brokers, just to name a few. I have extensive trial experience. I have fought to protect private property rights, water rights, and civil rights. I have also worked tirelessly for 17 years on federal regulatory reform, trying to lessen the costly and unreasonable burdens of NEPA, the Endangered Species Act, and the Clean Water Act, just to name a few. A governor is responsible for filling many, many positions, from agency heads to other management personnel. I have worked with local governments, with almost every industry group in the state of Wyoming, and in almost every geographic area. I have been traveling since August, listening to you and your fellow citizens. I know who is qualified to hold those positions and who has the expertise, who will bring an innovative and professional approach to Wyoming state government. I have the experience, the knowledge, the energy, and the skills to govern Wyoming. There are 3 primary reasons as to why I am running for governor. Number 1, to fight federal overreach and demand federal regulatory reform. Wyoming has a 1.5 on the Fraser Index. And what does that mean? It means that the impact of federal regulations in Wyoming is almost 50% higher than any other state in the nation. We're the 3rd highest score. This book in front of you is the Federal Register. That's 5 days of federal regulations. We have federal regulations cost $2.1 trillion. That is a hidden tax of $14,000 per household, and it's wrong. I'm also running for the second reason, as to put Wyoming's fiscal house in order. We have a $1.15 billion structural deficit in the state of Wyoming, but the fact is, you cannot grow the economy by growing government. We need to right-size our government. We need to assess the government's role in our lives and identify those services that are perhaps better provided by the private sector. We also need to practice what I refer to as good government: transparency, effectiveness, accountability, and efficiency. And number 3, I want to protect, defend, fight for, and advocate for our legacy industries, all of our industries, but our legacy industries that have made this state what it is: our minerals, our agriculture, and our tourism. To date, I am the only candidate who has issued comprehensive policy positions on a variety of issues, and I encourage you to review that information. In summary, I want to be the most business and family-friendly state in the nation, the governor that fights to protect your rights, your freedoms, and your liberties. In order to do that, however, we must recognize the importance of certainty and stability in terms of our tax policy, our regulatory policy, our permitting policy, and our business policy. And I am committed to making sure that my administration provides that. And I ask for your vote on August 21st of this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Harriet. Bill?
I'd like to give thanks to Jesus Christ, my Savior and Lord, first and foremost. I'd like to thank my wife for putting up with me on the road. And I'd like to thank all of you for being here. And we'll try to give all of us your best shot here. I'm a businessman. I was born and raised in Sheridan, Wyoming. And as a young man, I left the state to pursue opportunities. And I ended up in the mid part of the country. I am the only candidate up here that sells coal. I understand the coal sector. I also am the only candidate that purchased a coal mine that was previously out of business and turned it into a multi-level successful business, anywhere from frac sand to oil loadout to storing the Keystone pipeline, as well as other types of pipe transloading and things of that nature. I also have experience in the corporate world. I've climbed the corporate ladder and started many businesses from scratch. What I'm running for governor is because I think we all have the obligation to serve our community, our state, or our country in whatever fashion that we feel suited for. And I feel suited for this position. There's things that we need to do in this state that I need to work with the legislation to cut the budget, to work on budget areas that need to be cut. And it starts really with the governor and his position to set an example. There are 2 jet airplanes that the governor has within the WyoDOT and also the governor's plane. Now, it doesn't seem like a lot, but we need to look at setting examples and be specific on setting examples. And cutting these jet airplanes will save $3 million at least a year in operating costs, plus the liquid asset allocation back to the state. Why is that important? It's important because if the leader of the state doesn't show by example of where to cut the budget and start there, where are you going to start? Are you going to make excuses for everything else? We can absolutely drive, take charter flights or subsidized flights as far as that goes. There's other areas that we need to look at as far as I'm concerned. I've never hired anybody, never hired one person before they had a job to go to. And that's a catch-22. So if we train our people in the state, and we all know that we need good workforce here, if we train them and they don't have a place to go, they're going to leave. We've lost 8,500 people in this state in the last year and a half that left the state to seek opportunities. And the unemployment rate looks good at 3.8% because the unemployed have left the state. In other words, you could have 100 people, and we've lost available workforce by 2,000 in the last 6 months. So our economy is in trouble, and we need to think differently in order to fix it. We can't rely, I sell coal. We can't rely on the energy sector to always bail us out. We need to start thinking differently in order to achieve a more diversified state. So I'd like you to give consideration to me. In August is the primary, August 21st. I've traveled to every incorporated town and then some. I know how the state's stitched together. I think all of us working together, not one of us up here by ourselves can do anything without your support. And I'd like your vote August 21st. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Taylor?
Good afternoon. Thanks for the Fremont County Republican women for putting this on, and for PBS, and for Senator Bebout for his time to moderate this. As you know, I've run for governor before, and it's a process. First part of the process was to teach our people the importance of the Constitution. Anything that is set out by a government under our Republican form of government, which means representative form of government, a representative republic, that's not based on the Constitution is doomed to fail. And that is why we have a budget deficit, because we've strayed from the Constitution. The founders were very clear and very careful when they wrote the Constitution about what things government should do, about the purpose of government, and about things that are not the purpose of government. It's those things that are not the purpose of government that's gotten us into financial problems. And it's also by not adhering to the Constitution, we lose 51% of our overall natural resource mineral royalty. As you know, I promised to take over management of the federally managed lands now. They don't belong to the federal government, they belong to the state of Wyoming. We are not a territory, we are a state. If you look at Article 3 in the Constitution, the federal government is sovereign in the territories. If you look at Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 of the U.S. Constitution, the federal government is sovereign in 10 square miles of Washington, D.C. Otherwise, they have to purchase it, and they haven't purchased 51% of Wyoming. When I do that, it will add, conservatively, $800 million to $1 billion a year to our coffers. And we should set that up in what's called a multiple-use trust fund and manage it as we do our other trust funds. The key here is multiple use. We had true multiple use before the Clinton Roadless Initiative in 2001. We go back to that, we restore our forests, and they will be as they were before the Clinton Roadless Initiative. We add all of the revenue from our forest product industry to our other mineral revenues. This state has enough money. Even without that, we need different management. We need to go back to the Constitution. We need to do that at every level of government. And we all take the oath to uphold and defend the Constitution. But I doubt that many people that we elect even have ever read the Constitution. So if we're going to cure all of our ills, all of the promise of economic development, we have to do it under the Constitution. And speaking to economic development and diversifying our economy, you cannot diversify an economy without a resident, diversified workforce. And the way you do that is restructure how we deliver education. I plan to work with the WDE and the legislature, of course, to restructure how we deliver education. I am convinced that a student can finish his or her basic prep education by the time they end their sophomore year of high school. Now, if that child is gifted and pointed toward university education, we will have a much more robust university track than we have now. But people like me, surgeons who are gifted to work with their hands, who have spatial gifts, who know how things fit together, who see how things could be made better, we need to restore complete vocational education in our high schools, using community colleges and others to provide that sort of education that we've now neglected. That will diversify our economy. If we build that, they will come. And I ask for your vote on August 21st to see us radically transform our state into an economic engine like has never been seen in this United States of America. Thank you, and God be with us all.
Thank you, Taylor. Mark?
Good evening, and thank you to the Republican women of Fremont County, Wyoming Public Media, and to you, Mr. President, for moderating this forum. My name is Mark Gordon. I grew up on a ranch west of KC, and I learned the value of hard work, integrity, and finishing what you started. After college, I came back to the ranch with a wonderful wife, the mother of two precious daughters. Together, we built tourism-related businesses on the main streets of Buffalo and Sheridan, and we bought our own place, expanding our ranching operation. Tragically, I lost my wife in the 1990s when my daughters were 2 and 4, and I learned the value of community at that very point. From that point on, I focused on my kids, supporting mental health, and our schools. 20 years ago, I met my wife, Jenny, and together with her 2 sons, we have grown an amazing family. We continue to ranch in Johnson County and run other enterprises there, while our children have gone on to establish careers of their own. I was hired as an executive for Apache Corporation, a Fortune 500 oil and gas company with international operations. I think it was because of that experience in energy, agriculture, and tourism that I was elected to represent small business on the Kansas City Federal Reserve Bank Board. I served in that position until I was chosen by the Wyoming Republican Central Committee and Governor Matt Mead to finish the term of the late Joe Meyer, who passed away in 2012. You elected me as your treasurer in 2014 by the widest margin of any office on that ballot that year. I am very proud of what we have been able to accomplish in these 6 years. We revamped the office from the bottom to the top, getting rid of wasteful systems and expensive managers. We set about and crafted, with the help of the legislature, an amendment to the Constitution, which you all passed 2 years ago, allowing us to do a better job with your money. And we made changes to statutes that give communities more tools to do more themselves. Mr. President, you were part of that effort. It is important because what we do in Wyoming saves every citizen $1,500 typically every year and provides the second largest revenue source to the state's general fund. Our work has resulted in the best risk-adjusted returns, growing the portfolio by over $1 billion. Now I want to take that strong, effective, and conservative leadership and my experience on the state boards and working with the legislature into the governor's office to move our state forward to capitalize on all that Wyoming has to offer: opportunity, enterprise, and the chance to build your own future. I believe that begins by building a platform for prosperity that is based on three things. First, learning how to live within our means. And second, making sure government inspires innovation rather than limitation, by making sure our regulations are based on common sense, are efficient and understandable, reduced to the bare minimum, and that they are locally accountable at both the state and the federal level. And third, that we continue to provide exceptional educational opportunities from kindergarten through vocational, community college, and university levels. And we must provide the training people need to excel in a rapidly changing workplace. I love this state. I grew up here and I stayed here, building businesses here. I have worked hard as your treasurer and will take that same conservative leadership forward as your governor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Foster?
Thank you, Eli, and all of you for being here. It's kind of like coming home. I grew up in a little town in northern Wisconsin, 5,000 people. It was sort of lander. So I look around the room and I see there's my classmate Bob Gonski and there's Judy Gerland. So I'm basically home. And my mom dropped out of school, 8th grade, to pick cotton to save the family farm. My dad had a high school education. And that humble background allowed me to have a real compassion for the everyday guy. Half of our students were farmers, and you know how hard a farmer works. They don't get a lot of vacation time. And I just am excited about having the opportunity to tell a little bit more about what I would like to do if I were blessed to be your governor. I remember herding a few steers. We had a little ranch, not by Wyoming standards, but they're about 140 head, and I've been kicked in the shins a few times. Now, I realize being a rancher is not a requirement to run the governor, but I just want to identify with so many of my friends here who have that same background. The whole concept of government is really fascinating. In my prior life, I managed $15 billion of other people's money, pensioners, foundations. That was not a one-man job. Being governor is not a one-man job. For us to succeed, all these people in the room, we must work together because any governor cannot know all the issues. So it's a combination of each of you providing your expertise. It might be on healthcare, it might be on education. But together we can make this happen, and we can appreciate kind of prosperity and freedom. And the third motto after freedom and prosperity is kindness. And you look at the people running here, and you look at the people in Wyoming, we have an opportunity to spread that kindness to the rest of the nation. And I think that's an important part of what Wyoming represents, and could be a gift for the rest to the rest of the nation. What I'm blessed with is a background that not only has that $800 of accumulated leave pay when I left the Army. My wife cut my hair, scrubbed the floor, packed the lunches. But over those years, in addition to the wealth that has been given to me, I've developed an enormous amount of contacts that I would like to make available to the people in Wyoming. I just got a text this morning from Scott Pruitt. I gave him a little grief about his lotion quest. And also, about 3 weeks ago, I had a one-on-one meeting with Alex Azar talking about the work I've been doing in healthcare reform, about publishing prices. I also had, about 3 weeks ago, Secretary of State Pompeo called me. These contacts, I cannot tell you how important they are. I meet 4 times a year with a dozen governors. So I know Doug Bogram, who is in North Dakota, Susana Martinez in New Mexico. Why is that important? because basically these two states have the same kind of characteristics as Wyoming. They're both very heavy laden to minerals, and they have a lot of rural towns. So we can learn from them and use that information that they provide to help Wyoming become a lot better place. You look at all the opportunities to diversify, and we have to do it from the bottom up and use existing companies that are here. If we try to bring in a lot of extra companies, we're losing the opportunity to reward our existing companies. And so I just would like to think about putting in maybe a beef packing operation, which might be interested, or we can maybe put in a glass plant near Trona. There are a lot of opportunities. I look forward to further questions, but thank you for the opportunity to be here and to make my opening statement, and I look forward to further questions, provided those questions are not too difficult, Eli. Go easy.
Only for you, Foster. Thank you, Foster. Sam?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to the organizers of this event and to everybody here in attendance this evening and live stream with PBS. Hopefully you have all heard a little bit about me up to this point. I am a Wyoming native, born and raised in Cheyenne, where I currently live with my wife Stacy. We also have two little girls, 8 and 11, Isabella and Nicolette. I have spent my entire professional career in the business world. I currently run a variety of businesses, small businesses that we've started in the Laramie County area, in Carbon County. And I also currently serve as the chairman of the board for Greenhouse Data Corporation, one of Wyoming's premier technology companies. Prior to that, I spent about 20 years in the global travel technology industry, where I was blessed and fortunate to lead a number of very nice, good companies and a lot of good people. Some of those were WorldSpan Information Systems, Galileo International. I served as a CEO, and I also served as a CEO of a company called Cheap Tickets Inc., which you would probably know as cheaptickets.com. I've led, over my career, small businesses that I've started here in Wyoming, all the way up to large national and global companies that span 100 different countries with thousands of employees across the globe. Now, as far as the state of Wyoming goes right now, there's no question that we have some very significant challenges. It's been mentioned we have a $1 billion structural deficit in our finances, and what is happening is that deficit is creating pressure on everything we have in the state right now. It's creating pressure on our state agencies, our state employees. It's creating pressure on our education system, which we've heard a lot about. And also it's creating a lot of pressure at the local level with our local towns and governments and our counties, where they're really questioning what kind of support for their infrastructure and everything that they're going to have on a long-term basis, which really has a negative impact on their ability to build viable communities and have some type of predictability in their financial position going forward. As governor, I welcome the opportunity to take responsibility for those challenges, and I actually look very closely at wanting to be held accountable by the people of Wyoming to fix those problems. My priorities are fairly straightforward. We need to control our state spending. We need to drive economic growth and create jobs in our state by expanding our private sector. That's especially critical to being able to keep our young people here at home, not only our kids, but our grandkids. And third, we need to be able to ensure our education system is geared to prepare our kids for the jobs that we will create. It's absolutely important that Wyoming be in position. There's a huge outpouring of knowledge-based jobs from the coasts to Middle America, and we need to be in position to capture those jobs for our young people. I look forward to the continuing discussion through the rest of the evening. I ask for your support. I look forward to working with you and for you in putting Wyoming on the proper course as we move into the future. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. And now we're going to go into the question round. And for the candidates, what we'll do is you'll have 2 minutes to answer the question, and I will spell out the question. I will tell who's going to ask, then the respondent will have 2 minutes to respond, and we'll work through them. Hopefully we'll get through 9 questions. Nobody answer the same question twice, and nobody will be offsetting each other at the same time.
May I ask one question?
You may.
How much time is the yellow light? Is that 30 seconds?
That didn't take any of your time. Oh, that was on key to make sure we're on time. The yellow light did that. And Representative Lloyd Larson has helped me with these questions. So the first question, we'll start with Taylor, and then Mark, you'll have 2 minutes to respond. The first question is, with all the federal and state government programs available in our state, the citizens of Wyoming per capita receive more government services or funding than any other state in the nation. As a governor of Wyoming, how would you reduce, if you chose to reduce, the size of government both in size and funding, and what impact would those decisions have on the services provided to the citizens of our state? Go ahead, Taylor.
Well, as governor, to reduce the size of government, that's an interesting question, because what is the right size of government? First, you have to decide what the purpose of government is, and the purpose of government is to protect your God-given rights to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Any other agency function or government function not geared to that, then you could look at reducing and eventually eliminating. But note, the federal involvement, federal funding in our state is part of our problem. When we take over 100% of our mineral wealth, and when we restore our natural resource base in our forest products industry, we will have more than enough money to run our states, and we'll have an additional abundance of natural resource jobs for our people, everything from producing the natural resource to value added. So as governor, the first thing I'm going to do is look at the purpose of government, and I'm going to drive our state toward that in every way that I can. That's a process. It can't be done by the end of the week, but if when you're going in the wrong direction, the first thing you do is stop. And therefore, we will go in the right direction. We will set up the processes and systems so that our government can function and serve our people. You have to serve the people. You have to avoid chaos, and I understand that. But people are afraid of change, but it's time for a change, and I plan to make that change under the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of Wyoming. So the money that now goes to the federal government and is drizzled back to us with strings attached, we'll just keep it here in Wyoming with no strings. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mark, let's hold our applause till we get through the questions, please. Mark, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I remember the question, it was essentially that we have lots of government funds available, and how can we make sure they're better used by the communities? This is something that I've worked on very hard in the Treasurer's office for some time. Let me point this out. I think it's very important that local communities have all the tools they need to make their choices so that local taxpayers can direct the direction of their communities, not directed from Washington and not directed from Cheyenne. To do this, I think it's important that we have tools that are available. One of the things that we can do at the state level is to put a facilitator in the Office of State Lands and Investments that can help to navigate through the very complex process that it requires to get state funds, not state funds, federal funds through the state. This can leverage our communities' ability to build infrastructure and make themselves more business ready. The second thing I think we can do is to make sure that we do not take earning capacity off of the table by moving out of the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund our ability to invest, and instead make a loan that gets paid back at a very low rate of interest that reduces the ability to save you tax dollars, and also make sure that every taxpayer in the state of Wyoming is responsible for the project that's put in a particular town. We need to make sure local communities describe their future and define their future, not the state and not the federal government.
Okay, thank you, Mark. The next question will be for Bill and Foster. We'll start with Bill. And everyone appears to agree that in addition to supporting our existing industries, primarily our minerals, we need to diversify our economy. However, with Wyoming's current tax structure, the results of new businesses outside of the minerals industry coming to the state actually cost the state more than it receives. Do you see this as a problem? If so, as a governor of Wyoming, what would you do to correct it?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Mr. President. we got to recognize where the state revenue comes from. It comes from the mineral and energy sector. We ride that roller coaster ride a lot, and we need to change our way of thinking in order to stabilize our economy. Organic growth is one of the areas that we need to focus on. And organic growth, I mean, one of my comments was to bring in meat processing in the state. That's organic growth, where we don't need to buy businesses come in. We don't really have a problem of a gold rush of people coming into the state right now. We have, being diversified is the challenge, and trying to grow the economy is where it's at. One way of thinking differently is industrial hemp. Industrial hemp touches, we import about $1 billion worth of that product into this country right now in industrial hemp. And our way of thinking is, my dad wore hemp combat boots in World War II. Parachutes were made from hemp. Ships had rope. It's one of these things that we can declassify. It probably will be declassified this year as something we can organically grow in Wyoming that'll help diversify the economy. We got to start thinking about what we have and what we can use organically, and not be so concerned about how we're going to be overrun with the diversification. So that's one of the leveling areas that we need to look at in our economy, to think differently and to act differently in order to change our dependence on the energy sector. I sell coal. I want to defend that sector, but we need to think differently.
Okay, Foster?
I believe that part of the diversification has to come from the local levels and as much with free enterprise as possible. We cannot afford, or is it in our best interest, our existing companies, to bring another company in that competes against an existing company. We have many companies already. Electrocor in Laramie has a device that's for ships. There's 220,000 ships that need their process for doing water. We could expand that without having to bring people in who, as we just suggested, might cost more in benefits than they bring in revenue. So if you look at the Trona plant, I was down visiting with the president, Fred, and he says, maybe we could put a specialty glass company right next to the mine, much like the coal mines have some power plants. In order to deal with the diversification, however, there's a more basic problem which we talk on, and that's the issue, how do we get our expenses under control? If I'm blessed to be your governor, I want to look at every item and decide, is it necessary or is it nice? Now, the people in the past that have spent a lot of money, it was there, and I can understand. You can't blame them for spending the money to build these beautiful schools. But at the pinnacle of the education system, who is there? It's the teacher. Who's at the top of the medical system? It's the doctor. If you don't have a doctor, what good's a hospital? If you don't have a great teacher, what good is the school? So we have to make sure that we spend our money wisely and spend it on the teachers in our medical system, as opposed to trying to spend it on things that are really nice. We can do the nice things later. So diversifying is important, yes, but let's diversify by building our existing technologies, and the idea of Wyoming beef could be like Omaha steaks. We could brand that and sell it without having to bring in a lot of additional infrastructure that costs us more money than what we bring in. So I would consider that's a very good way to go about the diversification process. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Okay, thank you. The next question will be for Harriet and Sam. And Harriet, you'll be first. Governor Meade has established the economically needed diversity options for Wyoming. We all know it as Endow. And it's an initiative to provide a comprehensive approach to diversifying the state's economy. The legislature has funded this effort, indicating their support as well. As a torch passes, what would you do if elected?
Well, thank you, Eli. There's a couple of issues, a couple of concerns about that. One is that the Endow report has not been issued yet. The final Endow report will not be issued until August. The information that I have right now is focusing on subsidizing commercial air service, as well as some of the other diversification ideas that they've come up with. And I know that they were just recently in Laramie meeting with the younger folks, talking about ways to diversify the economy. I think that we need to take a step back and, again, determine what the role of government is in our lives. When we talk about diversifying our economy, when we talk about economic development, a lot of times we're talking about issues of central planning, and I think we need to be very careful about that. One of the things that I have repeatedly asked is, how does subsidizing commercial air service create jobs and generate revenue to the state of Wyoming. We need to make sure that when we're talking about economic development and diversification, that's what we're looking at. I think that several people have alluded to it up here, but the reality is, just this past week, there was a report that has been issued by an economist indicating that when we go down the road of economic diversification, it oftentimes costs the state more than it brings in revenue. So we can't be looking at just the concept of diversifying our economy or coming up with a program like Endow and thinking that that is going to be the panacea for all of this, that that's going to solve our problems. We really do need to look to that private sector. I think that we need to be looking at what the role of government is in our lives and making sure that the government is really only doing those kinds of things that the government ought to be doing and looking to the private sector for the other things. I support education. I support ideas of bringing new industries in, but I really do think we need to focus on our legacy industries, looking at a value-added approach, looking at the glass manufacturing for the Trona industry, bringing in transportation, bringing in potential additional rail lines. We need to have transportation. We need to have ways to diversify and focus on the industries that we have here right now that have really been the foundation for Wyoming.
Okay, Sam?
I absolutely love the aspirational aspects of Endow. Our governor has put together a group of some very bright people, both senior people in our state and next generation leaders of our state. Thinking about the future and being aspirational is never a bad thing. We need to focus more on the aspirational aspects. My biggest concern about Endow, not really a concern, but more of a discipline, is that it has generated a number of recommendations for taking care of problems that are very critical to Wyoming moving forward in the future. We need to make sure that each of those initiatives are like business cases and that we have rigor around every one of them based on how much do we need to invest in looking into the initiative, how long do we have to invest, what expectations do we have at the end, and how long will it take for us to achieve success. We need to do that because if any of those initiatives fail, we will all look to them and say we're never going to do that again. We need aspirational thinking in this state right now. If you look at it, how long has it been? My entire adult life and from a child in this state, a large percentage of our revenues come from the energy industry. Now, I've been taught over and over again in my life that the phrase, as we've all heard, don't put all your eggs in one basket. That is exactly where Wyoming is right now. We have all of our eggs in one basket, and the basket is beginning to crumble. We need to begin looking to the future and creating a vision of a new economy and new jobs in this state so that our kids can stay here, can make a living here, and can be successful here. So I'll repeat, anything aspirational, any aspirational thinking, I absolutely love, and we need to be doing more of it in this state.
Okay, thank you. That concludes round one. We'll now go to round two, and we'll start with, will be Harriet and Foster. We'll start with Harriet first, and the question is, we've definitely seen a change, a positive one, with the new federal administration in Washington to deal with the federal multiple use restrictions previously placed on our public lands. And we all understand the definition of multiple use and sustained yield. If elected governor, what would you do to ensure that the use of our public lands would include and develop further our minerals properly, but also the recreational development, tourism, grazing, and infrastructure development?
Well, and thank you, Eli, and I very much appreciate the changes that have come out of the current administration. As I've often talked about, President Trump, soon after taking office, issued 4 executive orders that were incredibly important related to regulatory reform. And through regulatory reform is the way in which we are able to better access and use the federal lands that exist within the state of Wyoming. One of the things that I have addressed in my policy positions is ways in which the state of Wyoming can partner to address and take management and control of a certain percentage of those federal lands so that we can do more of the multiple use type activities. Everything on our Forest Service lands as well as the BLM lands and those sorts of things. We absolutely have to work with this administration to make sure that we're getting the real reform that we need in terms of federal land management. Just the roadless rule alone denied access, management, and use to 58.5 million acres of National Forest Service lands within the United States, including 3.2 million acres in the state of Wyoming. It's largely responsible for the pine beetle outbreak that you see in a lot of the catastrophic forest fires. So there are real consequences to the bad decisions that came out of the previous administration. I will work hard with this administration. I've got a strong background in dealing with natural resource management and use in the Multiple States Use and Sustained Yield Act. I've dealt with everything from the Forest Service to the BLM to the Corps of Engineers, EPA, all of the various agencies, and understand how this regulatory regime works and how we can be more effective in terms of ensuring multiple use. Again, part of that is going to be access to our federal lands, making sure that our trails and roads remain open, making sure that our outfitters and our guides, our sportsmen are able to access those resources and use them and be able to manage them better so that we do not see the ecological catastrophe and disasters that we've seen over the last many years because of federal Washington, D.C. mismanagement.
Okay, thank you. Foster?
This is another example where hopefully the contacts I have could be useful to all of us in Wyoming. I exchanged emails recently with Ryan Zinke in Interior, and we were talking about the sage grouse issue. But another topic that my friend Butch Otter, who's the governor of Idaho, talked about, and I love this idea. He has a program that he's dealing with the federal lands where he can go in and he can manage the harvesting of the beetle kill. So he works out a deal where he goes in, the loggers take off the beetle kill, that reduces a fire hazard, they make some money, and he shares the money with the federal government and the state. So those kind of ideas, I think, make a lot of sense as to how do we use properly the federal and state lands. There's also the issue, if we were to acquire a lot of the federal lands, what happens when a fire breaks out? That's a very expensive deal, and I think there's a certain amount of value in having the federal lands in federal hands rather than we controlling them for a number of reasons. But as long as we can have access to them in a number of ways, that's the important thing. If we can have access in terms of recreation, and we have to draw a balance. Now, the whole idea of grizzlies. Some people think the outfitters would like to hunt the grizzlies. That kind of makes sense, I suppose, if there's too many of them. But the other hand, there's the fellow who has a tourist business. He has to show tourists the bear. He has no bear, he has no business. So maybe there's a certain part we could carve out that says, okay, no hunting bears in this area. I believe that for us to come together, we have to have a reasonable response back and forth of believing in one another's good faith. Left, right, forward march, together we'll get there. I started this program which unites Americans of opposing political views to efforts they both embrace. And that can be done very effectively here in Wyoming because we basically have an instinct that we want to work together. And so that dynamic between state and federal lands can be worked out just by reasonable people at a local level deciding how it should be taken care of. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next question will be for Taylor and Sam. Taylor, you lead off. The question is, the communities that lie in the interior of this state face unique challenges. Broadband access, cell phone coverage, air service, for example, are all things that are lacking, yet are critical for these counties and communities to attract businesses. As governor, what would you do to direct economic development opportunities to the interior of our state?
Thank you, Mr. President. You've addressed a problem that's basically part of the infrastructure, part of basic economics. Economics used to be just food, clothing, and shelter, and transportation. Broadband internet access is as important as any other leg of the economic foundation. So I think it's reasonable for the state to take a lead role in making sure fiber is available in all the communities in our state. The other issue is there's only rail access in two directions in our state. That's BNSF going north and south and some UP, and also the same two companies going east and west. We would have much more manufacturing if we had more rail access in our state. So we have to look at what we can do with taxes, regulations, and so forth, so that the entrepreneurs in the transportation industry and in the information technology industry are interested in investing in the interior of our state. There are lots of mineral resources that are not fully tapped because of transportation, and so as governor, I would work with the legislature to work with a tax structure and a regulatory structure so that it's attractive for people in the transportation and information technology industries, especially fiber, to invest in the interior of our state. That is an area where possibly, because we put money into roads and bridges and so forth, I think it's reasonable for the state to put money into fiber and broadband up to a certain point and then allow the private sector to take it from there with their myriad of possibilities. So I think basically it's part of our basic economic structure, and I think we should concentrate on bringing these things to the interior of our state. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, Sam?
Thank you. A couple of weeks ago, I put together a business advisory roundtable of different business leaders from around the state. Right now, I believe through their consultation, there are 6 prerequisites in this state in order to take care of our existing businesses and for any other businesses that are looking to locate here. One is we have to have workers. That is the number one priority. Number 2, we have to have an education system that is producing workers for jobs 5, 10, and 15 years out. Number 3, we need to be connected physically in this state to the rest of the world through air service. Number 4, we need to be connected electronically through high-speed broadband fiber internet. Number 5, we need to have a workable, viable healthcare system, not only for our older senior citizens that we have today, but for new workers as they are developed within our state. And lastly, we need to empower our local communities to create growth at the local level. Growth never occurs at the top of anything. It always happens at the bottom and where the rubber meets the road. Those 6 prerequisites are imperative, and many of them were included in your question. Air service and high-speed broadband are both initiatives of the Endow project, and there has been significant progress made with those initiatives in the planning and definition of what needs to be done in order to bring them to our state, to our businesses, and to our people. I would continue the focus in those areas.
Okay, the next question will go to Bill and Mark, and Bill, you'll be the first to answer. Because of the Supreme Court and rulings regarding K through 12, and it's a huge issue for the state of Wyoming, and we all know about the deficit that we have in spending, and it's a moving target, maybe $300 million a year, something like that, and certainly we spend more than any other states in our region, yet we question the results and where we stand. What is your plan to deal with not only the deficiency and the deficit we have relative to the cost of education, but how we maintain high quality of education without continuing to spend our LISRA account, which is our rainy day savings account?
Thanks, Mr. President. I'd like to work with the legislation on that issue. That would be a direct reflection of managing the budget. Also, I feel like there might be a little bit too much overreach with the judicial branch involved in the budgeting process of the schools.
Okay. Well, that was saved us some time. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Okay, Mark.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, part of that is the basket of goods that we have to define, and I would like to work with the legislature on looking at what that basket of goods really should be. We have made in the Treasurer's Office changes to return more current income and better the returns so that Common School account and other accounts can deliver more of that budget sort of closing that we hope to have. And then finally, I think on the reduction of expenditures, 2 things. One is capital construction, and the second thing is to take a look with the legislature at trying to build accountability into school boards, because as you look around the state, every school board's got a little bit different story to tell, and coming down from the top doesn't really work. So we have to walk with, I was a school board member, I know where some of the gaps are, and I think building that accountability in there. I'd like to take the balance of my time just to talk briefly about the diversification study. When we talk about the burden that diversification puts on the system, it's based on the schools. The schools, if we build a big facility that is not related to minerals, it's going to burden our students, or not burden our students, but burden our school system. Diversification can happen on a small business scale, and so it's important as we diversify these efforts that we allow for lots of little businesses in communities, because if we don't have a diverse economy in our communities like Lander does, it just isn't a fun place to be. So thank you very much.
Okay, that concludes round 2. We're going to move into round 3, and it'll be Mark and Foster. And Mark, we'll start with you. Find the question. There it is. Okay, of course, Fremont County is a home to the Wind River Indian Reservation. The Eastern Shoshone and the Northern Arapaho Tribe have a unique perspective. There are congressional action sovereign governments with rights associated with that distinction, yet they're also citizens of the state of Wyoming and have rights to claim in that distinction as well. As governor, how do you envision the interaction with them in a government-to-government relationship, as well as your relationship to them as their governor?
Well, thank you, Mr. President. I think this is an important consideration, particularly in Fremont County and Hot Springs County, where the Shoshone and Arapaho tribes are. One of the things that I think we should do is support funding the tribal liaison again. In the past, the tribal liaison has been more of a lobbyist for the tribes, and I think over the last couple of years, it's been a much more collaborative effort. It is important that we have good relations with the tribes and that we establish a very cordial and beneficial mutual back and forth conversation when we deal with things like the EPA's air quality issue, which is particularly difficult for places like Riverton, and when we have to deal with the potential issue that's going to be an enormous one for the state of Wyoming, which is the Herrera case that we are very concerned about from the Supreme Court at this point. Having good relations with the tribes, having a mutual back and forth, and a strong tribal liaison is going to be essential to making sure that we navigate this carefully.
Okay, Foster?
I believe the opportunity to develop those relationships are now, and it's kind of interesting. Last night we took Kim and Mark Lambert to the governor's gala, and they sat at our table with Governor Meade. And who is Kim Lambert? She's part of the Shoshone tribe, and she, listen to this, this is the most incredible celebrity I think I've ever run into. She is a great-great-great-granddaughter of Sacagawea, and she's a great-great-granddaughter of Chief Washakie. I mean, how often does that happen? So by able to spend time with them and understand, as we travel there, the disparity between the two tribes, this has been going on since the 1800s. And so there is an opportunity to bring them together by something called rachelschallenge.org. I'd encourage you to hop onto that, and it shows how you bring people together to create a sense of belonging. And they don't use the word tolerate. You know, I don't want to tolerate you, and I don't want you to tolerate me. I want you to accept me, and we should accept them. So we have a lot of work to do to try to bring these two different tribes together and be able to create an economic viability, because they now don't have this friction that's been going on for a real long time. And I think we could perhaps stop that. So the whole relationship that you're discussing with what they need should come from the personal relationships that we began last night. She told me that over at the school near here, they have an incredible opportunity for STEM. The lab is there, the equipment is there, but there's no teacher. And then she talked about the healthcare system. So we have to reach out to people. They are our neighbors. They deserve our attention. And I believe by developing those personal relationships, the little son Maximus, he's 12, grandson, he's the future. And he said in the schools, they seem to get along a little better. So I believe that the answer to your question should come in building those personal relationships. And they had a great time at the gala last night sitting with the governor.
Okay, thank you. The next question will be for Bill and Taylor. And Bill, you start off. As a conversation about generating other sources of revenue for the state, a common conversation is whether or not Wyoming should have a severance tax on electricity generated from wind. Do you think wind should be classified as a resource like coal and oil? If so, should that resource provide and revenue benefit the state? As governor, what do you think?
I think we ought to wait till we get the 1,000 wind turbines in down in the Red Desert before we make that move. I'm not for taxes necessarily. However, as far as our economy goes, we do need to look at diversification and how we diversify our economy. It's very important. We had the Wyoming Business Council started 20 years ago for one purpose only, and that was to diversify our economy. That's a government entity that started then. 20 years later, and almost $1 billion later, we're still in the same boat. 70% dependent on the energy sector. So what do? We double down with Endow. Now, Endow, I believe, like Sam, the intent of these organizations is to diversify the economy. But they're not working. If the Wyoming Business Council did not work, we shouldn't double down on that type of thinking. We need to change our thinking when it comes to diversifying our economy and where our resources come from. We do have the opportunity to think differently, and we should use that. We all should work together to think about opportunities and organic growth within the state, because we can do that. Remember, I sell coal, and I want to protect the coal sector. And I understand that we have the opportunity to do differently, too, as well.
Okay, thank you. Taylor?
Well, initially your question was whether or not wind should be taxed the same as the other power-generating industries, and the answer is yes. If wind is not taxed the same as coal-fired, natural gas-fired, hydroelectric, etc., now we're picking winners and losers. We're propping one up at the expense of the others who are paying the tax. The tax should be the same, and that industry should float on its own bottom. It should return revenue to its investors and should pay its fair share of taxes. That is not necessarily a new technology. Wind technology is like 14th century, and now we put some motherboards on it and have bigger blades. And if that works, great. If it works, great. But it needs to float on its own bottom, and it has to pay the same taxes as everybody else in that industry pays, period. Thank you.
Okay, the last question goes to Sam and Harriet. And Sam, you'll be first. Everybody up here has an opinion, including me, about how Wyoming looks in the overall picture about population, taxes, revenues, etc. If you're elected governor, what does the state look like at the end of your first term? Sam.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I have three primary objectives. One is to control our state spending. So as a state, we would be far more efficient in the expenditure of our resources, our financial resources. Number two, I would have focused primarily on economic growth and creating new jobs, so we would begin to see new industries and a broader job base in our state, which is absolutely necessary for us to move into the future. We cannot rely on the model we've worked with up to this point in time. And number three, we would have an education system that is beginning to populate the kids into those jobs. Last year, I believe we graduated roughly 5,500 kids out of our high schools around the state. We have the ability to create our own workforce. The problem is that we don't have the right jobs here. We have jobs in energy, travel tourism, ag, amongst other industries. But when a kid graduates, whether they're going to go on to a 4-year degree or they're going to go 2 years or they're going to go directly to work, we need a broad job base for them to walk into. Our kids leave the state because they don't have work here and because they're seeking a great lifestyle. So I would say that at the end of my first term, we will have extinguished our problem with the financial deficit that we have. We will be creating new jobs, and we will have our state expenditures under control.
Harriet?
Thank you. I'm actually very optimistic for Wyoming. I'm an optimistic person, and I see that Wyoming's future is bright. 4 years from now, we're going to see Wyoming deregulated. We're going to have regulatory reform at the state level, but we're also going to have a better and stronger relationship with the federal government. Wyoming, as a sovereign state, is going to be on more even footing with the federal government in terms of resource management and all of those things. We will have better management of our natural resources. We'll have better management of some of our National Forest Service lands as well as BLM lands. I'm hoping that we will be looking at bringing in new industry into the state of Wyoming that is, again, value added with the industries that exist here now. Plastics manufacturing. I am hoping that the University of Wyoming, that I'm working with the University of Wyoming to develop new and better new uses for some of our coal products. I was recently at the energy conference in Laramie, and that is an exciting area. There are so many different things that can be manufactured out of our cool products themselves: textiles, paint, fiber, carbon fibers, cement additives, those kinds of things. Well, the University of Wyoming should be at the forefront of that kind of investigation and analysis to be able to use those products. I see a dramatic reduction in the wolf population, closer to the recovery goals and what we're required to maintain in the state of Wyoming, and I see better control and management of our grizzly bears so that we can protect our other wildlife and we can protect our ranching industry.
Okay, let's give these candidates a good hand. That concludes our questions. We will now go to their opportunity for their closing comments, and we'll reverse the order. Rather than 1 through 6, we'll start with 6. Sam, you're first. 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Right on. Thank you. I have spent my entire adult professional career leading people and organizations in the pursuit of solving large, complex problems and taking advantage of large-scale opportunities. That is exactly what we need to do in Wyoming right now. We need to begin living in the future to a certain extent. We need to be aspirational, and we need to take a hard look at how we're going to move our current revenue model and how we are going to position ourselves so that we are creating jobs and creating economic growth in our state. It is absolutely imperative that we begin to make that transition right now. If we do not begin creating more economic growth in our state and creating jobs, not only will our kids leave the state and not be here for us, but our state will fall behind what's going on in the rest of the U.S. As you all notice, many of the states around us are going up right now. We have been going down. We need to change this dynamic right now. I am a problem solver. I'm a troubleshooter. I love living into the future, and I love creating a vision and creating a plan for my organizations to get there. I look forward to taking responsibility for the problems and challenges that the state has right now, and I look forward to working with you and for you in creating a better Wyoming, not only for ourselves, but for our kids, so that they can take it from us and move into the future successfully. Thank you.
Okay. Foster?
When I was younger, I worked really, really hard. So now I'm in a position where I can work for you for free. And I've committed to give my 4-year, $500,000 salary to the small little charities throughout the various small towns in Wyoming. But why that's important for you is I can't be bought. So I don't have to be holding any specific industry, and I can look specifically to one single taxpayer and be looking to take care of your needs. So I only have 3 promises. I promise to care about you, I promise to listen to you, and I promise to work very hard for you. Now, these times can get kind of boring, so I think we ought to have family, friend, faith, and fun. So I'm going to finish up with a joke. This fellow calls his whole family in, and he's really on his deathbed. So he gets his accountant, he gets his lawyer, and the nurse is there, and they turn on the recording machine. He says, Jimmy, I want you to have all the beach apartments from 3rd Avenue to 5th Avenue. Tommy, you take the government building downtown, and Bill, I want you to have the 2 developments east of town, Sharpley and Woodbrook. And the nurse turns to the lawyer and the accountant and says, we had no idea he had such vast real estate holdings. The lawyer said, well, actually, he has a paper route. So with the remaining few seconds, one of the gifts I've been given, or skill set, is the ability to gather organize information very quickly. If someone, say, invest in United Widget, I could call the CFO, the chief executive officer, the customer supplier, and very quickly make a decision to put $5 to $10 million to work. So there's so many things that we need to know. The knowledge that exists in this room, we need to tap into that. None of us can do it as a one-man show. So we hope the knowledge that exists in this room can be used in that process to allow us to gather it and to make this state what we all want it to be. We love this place, and let's all work together to make it the best state. Number 1 in education for number 7.
Thank you. Mark?
Well, again, I want to thank the Fremont County Republican Women, Georgia and Pepper, and Wyoming Public Media for organizing tonight's forum. And thank you, viewers and people in the audience here, for paying attention tonight. This is an important election. I am Mark Gordon. I'm your treasurer and a candidate for governor, and I would appreciate your vote in August. Foster, I was just thinking about the issue of our salaries. I have to tell you, people in this state are well organized, and most of your salary ends up going to lots of little charities anyway, so it's a good thing.
And he routes it very nicely.
I want you to know that I love this state. I grew up here, stayed here, building businesses here. I raised my family here, taught my kids how to shoot and hunt and fish here. I love everything about this state, from our wildlife and open spaces to the opportunities anyone enterprising enough to take advantage of them can turn into great companies. I believe in the people of Wyoming, and as your governor, I will seek to build on our successes, better our platform for prosperity, and work tireless to keep Wyoming forever the best place to raise your family and build your future. My track record of strong, effective, conservative leadership is a matter of public record. You can find it in the minutes of the State Loan and Investment Board, and in my work as state treasurer. You can see it in the fact that the Peterson Institute ranked us number 1 in the nation, number 3 in the world for transparency. And you can see it in the fact that I stood up for the Constitution and prevailed in the Supreme Court. It wasn't easy, and I took some criticism. But it's important in the end to know where to draw the line. In America and Wyoming, we are blessed to have citizens willing to step forward. Thank you for and safe travels to my fellow candidates. God bless Wyoming, and let's keep her free.
Taylor?
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you all for being here, and for the Republican women of Fremont County and the Republican Party in Fremont County and PBS for putting this on. I've been in Wyoming 34 years. I was recruited here as a surgeon in Cheyenne, and I just never lived anywhere else where I fit in so well. I did the first neonatal surgery done in Cheyenne and went on from there, but the people of Wyoming filled my practice and made me a success. These are people that stand with you and give you a chance. I am very blessed with a classical education and a very broad experience in our free enterprise system. The question about the windmills was clearly in my wheelhouse because I was one of the first people in the country writing computer programs for Tennessee Valley Authority to decide how many power generating units, nuclear, coal-fired, or hydroelectric, we needed on the system from southern Pennsylvania to northern Alabama. And then I was recruited to Salt Lake City by Kennecott Copper, and so I have some experience in the mining industry and some experience in those areas. As a surgeon and as an engineer, I have patents after my name for medical equipment. My wife and I run a third-party administrator, so we have actually survived Obamacare, praise the Lord. And we do have some insights into healthcare. I've been blessed with intellectual and professional gifts that I am now compelled to share with the state of Wyoming. When I talk about putting us on a constitutional form of government, I have lived the Constitution. I have chased the Fish and Wildlife Service out of southeastern Wyoming over a little critter called the Pebbles Meadow Jumping Mouse without going to court, using my Constitution and using my classical education. So I want to bring God's gifts and all of my talents to bear for the state of Wyoming and for its people. I love you all, and I've been loved by Wyoming, so God be with us all. Thank you very much.
Bill, go ahead.
Thank you for having me here, and thank you, Mr. President. I do believe that we have good candidates up here. I grew to like them all. And I do bring something to the table that's unique. I have a background in the energy sector, selling coal, and also in the rail industry. I'm very familiar with the rail industry as I built a career in the rail industry at one time. So I understand how the infrastructure works in Wyoming and what we rely on. I think working with those industries is paramount to the success of Wyoming, but we got to keep in mind that we've lost people leaving the state. Our credit rating as a state has gone from AAA down to a AA rating in the last year. Things are not headed in the right direction. A year ago, we had 25 gas and oil rigs. Today, we have 27. That's not a very big increase, and it's fluctuated back and forth. Coal is flat, and it's a flat market right now. So we have to think differently. We have to bring other things to the table. It's very important that we think that way. If we don't, we're in trouble. And right now, relying on some of the government programs like the Endow and the Wyoming Business Council have not effectively changed anything in Wyoming. But there are things we can do if we open the doors and take down the tripping wires for all of you and all of us to work together to think differently on how the state operates and what we do with the state. It's up to you. It's all up to us working together as a team to make Wyoming better. Thank you for having me here.
Harriet?
Thank you, and it has been an enjoyable evening. I have spent the last 10 months traveling around the state of Wyoming, meeting with many different sectors. I've met with county commissioners, city council members, doctors, and hospital board members. I have met with farmers and ranchers and irrigation districts. I've met with small business owners. I've met with engineers. I've met with accountants. I've met with economists. I have met with the people who provide the services in the state of Wyoming. I have met with the public employees. And I have spent an enormous amount of time educating myself on those issues that at least 10 months ago I was not quite as familiar with. I have files on things related to the mental health issues that challenge us right now. Wyoming has a higher suicide rate. We're third in the nation in that regard. We have some very serious mental health issues. We have issues associated with elder care. We have issues associated with delivering health care in the state of Wyoming. I have worked tirelessly over the last 10 months learning those issues and reaching out to the experts and those individuals who can help us to solve some of those problems. I see that Wyoming has a bright, bright, bright future. Wyoming is a great state, and the people that I've been able to meet with and work with also have the same dedication to the state that I do. I believe that as governor, we can bring all of that expertise together. We can bring the expertise together to address these challenges that we have in some of our small communities in the state of Wyoming, with our education system, and again with our healthcare system. And the commitment that I will make to you tonight is that with the amount of work that I've done over the last 10 months, I will continue to do that for you as your governor. My commitment is that I will work tirelessly for you, the citizens of the great state of Wyoming, as your governor. And I humbly ask you for your vote on August 21st. Thank you.
Well, that concludes the forum for this evening. I want to thank all of you in the audience for taking the time on a Saturday evening to come out here and listen to this wonderful forum. And by the way, there's 6 talented people up here. Let's once again thank them. It's not easy to run a statewide campaign, and each and every one of them have made that commitment, as has their spouses and significant others. So good luck on the road. Be careful driving. Thank you. And all of you out there, August the 21st is the primary. This is an important election. Your vote does count. All you have to do is ask several people that have lost by 1 vote or won by 1 vote. Your vote does count. I would encourage you to stick around for a little bit. I'm sure these candidates are available for a little bit in case anyone has any other questions. There are a lot of other questions we couldn't get to, but thank you for participating, and thank the candidates, and that concludes our forum.
I think we